Hello, welcome to Ask Cygnus. Please welcome your host, Ryan Perry, and his guest, Michael Hale.
Hello. Good morning, Michael.
Good morning, Ryan.
How are you, sir?
I'm great today. Great day today. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing some time with us. I appreciate the opportunity to just have some dialogue with you as always, but more specifically, just coming past Cybersecurity Awareness Month, we're going to talk about all things pertaining to cybersecurity from your perspective and mine, and hopefully develop enough of a good enough dialogue to where we might even prod some interest from some folks to follow up and ask us more questions.
Oh, wonderful.
So I'd like to first kind of start off by giving you an opportunity. I've known you for years in both the professional and personal capacity, and so it's easy for me to understand who you are and what you do. But for those that might watch as a follow-up, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and 360 Risk Management Agency and all things related to why we're talking today.
Oh, great. Thanks, Ryan. So I am an insurance coverage lawyer and an insurance agent. So I wear a couple different hats. A large part of what I do is putting together insurance programs for businesses and also monitoring insurance programs that may be written by other agents. But we really try at 360 Risk Management, which is our agency, to take the lawyerly approach to writing of insurance. And when anybody buys a policy, whether it's a cyber policy or a fire insurance policy, you're buying a contract. We find that most of the time, buyers that enter into contracts don't usually do that unless they check with their lawyer first. So we think there's a nice tie-in between being a lawyer that understands insurance and one that also understands the insurance agency side of the business. So we spend a lot of time on that. We look carefully at these policy contracts to see what gaps are. We compare the policies among competing insurers, like we'll talk about in the cyber capacity. There are many different insurance companies nowadays that are offering cyber coverage. But if you try to compare those policies, it's not easy. There are many different nuances, different language. And I can tell you, having litigated a lot of insurance coverage cases and I'm currently involved in a number of cases, that insurance companies write these policies in a way that they know the courts will interpret them. And that primarily is, if it's unambiguous, whatever the policy language says is going to be interpreted in its plain meaning and enforced accordingly. So that means if there's an exclusion, the court will look at it and say, well, we find this to be pretty clear, and we're going to enforce the language as written. We're sorry that you didn't read it, policyholder, or you didn't understand it, but we're going to enforce it as written. So there's a lot there. There's a lot to unpack when it comes to all types of insurance policies, and we think that it's very helpful to have an attorney involved in that buying process. So we do that here at 360. But we sell insurance as well, and we certainly do have a lot of cyber insurance policies out there for our many clients. And we've taken the time. This is a new area, cyber insurance. It used to be that people would buy their basic property insurance for their building, liability insurance in case they got sued if someone was injured on their property, and workers' compensation. And then a number of years ago, they started adding some coverages as society and the law developed. Employment practices was one area, that being if you get sued for wrongful discharge, harassment, discrimination pertaining to employees. And that was kind of a new coverage in the 90s. But nowadays, that's a staple to all insurance programs. Almost every business has it. Same thing is happening with cyber. Years ago, you could buy coverage for cyber, and you didn't necessarily, you always think it's never going to happen to me, but nowadays it's getting to be more standard. That meaning it's eventually going to be a staple to all insurance programs that there be cyber coverage as part of it. Some carriers are actually even throwing in some coverage on small business owners' policies to kind of give you coverage in that area. So it's a long-winded answer of saying that we like to take an attorney's approach to writing insurance because we understand these exposures, especially as related to the new and emerging area of cyber insurance.
It'd help if I wasn't muted, eh? That's great, Michael. I think that makes a lot of sense, and it's a very interesting combination of skill sets and being able to merge those things together. Because, in fact, in the event that you have some sort of a breach and have to adhere to, whatever legal ramifications come as a result of that, it's nice to also have the attorney representation or legal representation to kind of sit alongside whatever those efforts of remediation or liability mitigation might be. So makes a lot of sense. It reminds me very much of some of the complementary aspects of what we do as it pertains to network security. And by default, it seems to be that we find ourselves for falling into really the conversations around cybersecurity and getting asked very often to be in a position where it's almost as if we're very close to the line of governance, which is not really something that we do. We help and assist companies get the gaps kind of filled in and remediate areas within their network that are known vulnerabilities, and put them more of in kind of an offensive stance versus defensive. But at the same time, the customers are relying upon us to give them the tools and the information and the insight and education really that they need in order to make very good decisions around cybersecurity. So I find there to be this tremendously broad continuum of understanding and execution and awareness. And it really just kind of depends on where a client may be on that continuum as to what extent that we engage or make recommendations for those organizations to engage someone like yourself. So that's an interesting perspective. And you're right, there is a lot there. We try our best to compartmentalize how we represent ourselves as it pertains to helping customers with cyber security within their network. And certainly the pandemic really was like a tidal wave of business owners being forced to make decisions to move their workforce in a distributed manner and do that as securely and as efficiently and effectively as possible. So we were just busy as all get out, probably in the first 6 months when COVID happened, February, March, April. We were really kind of caught off guard with the huge demand that was kind of brewing with customers that would ask us how to help them do this in a secure way. And on the other side of that, as we're hopefully soon to be coming out of COVID and all the associated protocols, we've established ourselves with the clients that sought us out to help as a great crutch or a great partner, I should say, to help them along that continuum. So great distinction there. In terms of your business and the representatives, the lawyers, the various different agents that help your clients, if there were any particular aspects of expertise that you'd like to highlight within your team, what would that be?
Yeah, other than the lawyer side, we've got risk managers here that have specific designations in risk management that's recognized nationally, accredited advisors in insurance, certified insurance counselors. So, we're big on education. These are complicated things, especially when you're trying to protect the assets of a client. Now, what a serious role that is, to be entrusted with ensuring and making sure there's the right coverages in place for a particular business entity. And we take that very seriously. So we require a lot of education of our staff. And we really find that that's very important to differentiate ourselves in the marketplace.
Absolutely. And I think that that's a great distinction to make. And that is, there are software and hardware tools that you can put in place, but it really is also a matter of developing a cultural awareness within your organization for you to be able to establish kind of a baseline of do's and don'ts, and to build upon that to the extent that you can even get as far as to, even have a documentation of processes and procedures that are based on human behaviors, and to certainly complement that with various different aspects of training to make sure that the user awareness is heightened. The customers that we work with, I tell them all the time, there's only a certain amount of software and hardware that can get you to the line of where you want to be. It also is combined with having a great training program and an awareness sort of environment to where you're constantly making sure that you're doing everything you can as a business owner to make sure that your staff has the awareness along with the tools that they need in order to have at least amount of exposure as possible. And I feel like that's something that business owners are becoming more in tune with because of the various different, aspects of all the social media postings that you see and everything that you see in the news. And it's no longer a tough conversation to convince a business owner that they need to have, hardware and software tools in place that are security preventative mechanisms. But then along with that, to be able to offer them some type of a path to establishing a training program or protocols and processes that their users can adhere to. Because at the end of the day, not everyone is maliciously doing things. And very often it's the case that we do things because we're not aware. And so if you were to kind of summarize, maybe just within a couple, 2-3 suggestions, what do you see most often that as executives make mistakes around cybersecurity insurance and associated coverages? What are the things you see most often that they trip over?
Yes, what we see is it's not only in the cyber insurance context, but really buying all of insurance. We tell our client businesses that you shouldn't buy insurance the way that you buy janitorial supplies.
Sure.
It's not commodities. All these policies, like I mentioned when we started this, are policy contracts, and they're all different. They all have different number of words in the policies. They're all interpreted in different ways. So we really think that business owners ought to, understand that this is not an apples to apples comparison. When you're buying a cyber policy and one's, $1,200 and one's $1,500, you don't necessarily go with the cheaper one. Seems like common sense, but the common question we get is how do we save money? And we spend a lot of time trying to educate clients on why it is that maybe you should pay that $300 extra because this has coverage that is going to really benefit you as opposed to buying something that may be an inferior product. So certainly it's important to have an advisor, an insurance agent that understands what they're doing. It doesn't take very much to become an insurance agent. It's only really a 40-hour class, and then you're entrusted, as I mentioned earlier, with protecting the assets of another organization. So you want to find an insurance agency that has expertise, that is going to help you read the policies. I find that most businesses do not read their insurance policies. And I have to say that, I am subject to that as well. I haven't read my homeowner's policy, right? Until the time of a claim. Then you dig it out and you start reading it.
Of course.
The courts say that you are obligated to read your policy and raise any questions within a reasonable period of time. We don't find that the typical buyer of insurance will necessarily do that. For one, even if they read through the policies, there's a lot of fine print, technical meanings of words, and they may not understand exactly what they're reading. And even if they do, they would not understand the options that are out there available to them. So you want to have an agent that can help you read the policy. Sometimes the agents don't even read the policies they're selling, and we think it's a big mistake. So you want to do that. You also, a big area now, I can tell you, on the insurance litigation side, and when insurance companies deny claims, whether it's for cyber or other types of things like auto accidents, they always go back to looking at the application that you filled out or that your agent filled out for you. And they say, you know what, you told us in this cyber application that you had this particular type of firewall and that you had a monitoring program and that you required your vendors to have certain security aspects and you trained your employees and you had a cyber attack response plan. And as it turns out, in our investigation here at the time of this $1 million claim, you didn't have those things.
Yeah.
So that was a misrepresentation. We wouldn't have written the policy if we had known that. And we're going to rescind it, which means we'll just pretend like, here's your money back. We'll pretend like it never happened. You don't want to be in that position. It's really important to spend quality time looking at applications, and cyber applications are pretty extensive. You know, with this new and burgeoning area of insurance, carriers want a lot of information. They want to know what procedures you have, what protocols, how you train your employees, what claims you've had. And if you let the agent fill it out for you, they're not going to know a lot of the answers, but it ultimately could come back to haunt you. So spend a lot of time worrying about what you put in these applications. And if you're unsure on a question, you should put language that suggests that, you know, you're not totally clear of what they're asking. You don't ever want to be in that position of losing coverage because a carrier says you didn't tell us the whole thing up front. You know, the other thing I think that is very important in the process is you shouldn't buy insurance policies from different agencies if you can. You should really have one trusted advisor, agency, or agent that you're going to work with that can put all this together for you in more of an insurance program instead of having a group of policies. I'm involved in a case right now where there are a couple different insurance agencies that a business had bought policies from. And what happened is that, you know, they weren't coordinated together. So now both of these agents are being sued saying you should have written your insurance policy this way, and the other agent should have done this. And there was a huge gap in coverage. So try to have one agent and, you know, see if most of the time agencies can write all lines of coverage. And that's what you want to look to as a way to help protect yourself, not only for cyber coverage, but really for all insurance policies that you're buying.
Wow, that's great. That's great. I tell you, Michael, that you couldn't have teed up better the idea of having kind of disparate systems and processes in place that are not congruent of one another in terms of the overall outcome or whatever is the desired business outcome, right? So I relate to that by talking to customers about network security tools that are not integrated with one another, that are disparate. So I got a firewall of this brand and type and an antivirus solution of this brand and type and an anti-spam solution that's of this brand and type, all of which are great, but they're not cohesive in that they all don't work together to complement one another. In some cases, there's more or less of that, but that's a great example, kind of in a parallel suggestion of making sure that you have comprehensive, congruent processes and services and tools and resources in place to give you the desired business outcome that you're looking for. So you couldn't have teed that up any better. Similarly, I get asked almost to the point of being a little bit uncomfortable, almost on a daily basis, to talk about cybersecurity and to help customers with their cybersecurity insurance applications. Literally, I have a call scheduled tomorrow and Thursday with clients to do that very thing. Some of which are doing exactly what you said not to do and completing the application with either information that's not totally accurate or suggesting that they're doing things that they can't prove that they're doing because they have no documentation, no means of suggesting, yes, all these check boxes and things that we said we're doing. Here's how we're doing it. Here's the tools we're doing it. And here's the last documentation for it. Very much a big gap I see in customers that have started the process of cybersecurity insurance, but really in all the associated things that they're supposed to be doing on their end, and really finding very often, unfortunately, that they're not doing it or never did it. So that's a big one in my book. And then similarly, making sure that I don't go too far with the suggestion of governance that I mentioned earlier, where that's not our expertise, that's not our bailiwick. We are a managed services security provider in the sense that we can help to implement. We can help to monitor. We have tools and services in place to help customers do that. But the governance aspect of cybersecurity, and even as it pertains to guidelines and requirements such as NIST and CMMC and all the really high level compliancy regulations, HIPAA, everything of the sort, we are not the organization. We are a service provider to the organization. So I tell customers all the time, there's a certain amount of responsibility that's going to fall on you. And here's the line of distinction and delineation of what falls on me and what I can do. And so it sounds to me that you're doing very much the same thing in your interactions from a risk management perspective and helping your customers understand in a similar capacity.
Yes, and I can tell you this. Everyone wants to know how they can save money and not spend as much on premiums. We tell clients that a lot of times you're in the driver's seat on that, meaning that if you work with an organization like a Cygnus, where you've got the professional approach to managing your data, to avoiding attacks, cyber attacks, to making sure that you've got a secure system, that's something that makes our job easier selling it to the insurance companies of saying, look, ABC company here has got it together. Here's a report from their IT department that says, or their vendor that says, these are the things that they're doing. Insurance company underwriters say, wow, it's probably unlikely they're going to have a claim, or if they do, we will be able to mitigate it. And so that is a very important concept that, it's sort of like having your building insurance. If you have a sprinkler system in that building, right, for fire protection, underwriters from insurance companies are certainly going to feel a little bit better about insuring that than if you don't. So yeah, it costs more money to put that kind of thing in, but in the long run, it could be really saving you money. Same thing with cyber. If you're doing the right things, you're going to be much more sellable to an insurance company, and that really will help your bottom line.
Excellent. A couple things that stood out to me. Obviously, I knew I was going to have a conversation with you today, and we would talk about a number of different things that I was already aware of, or at least somewhat in tune with. And then I hoped, and as we have, that there would be some things that would be kind of unscripted or things that we didn't necessarily anticipate. A couple things stood out to me in some of the dialogue, preliminary dialogue that we've had over the recent weeks. And that was your take on, social engineering, reputational damage, and basically, how advanced persistent threats are treated and handled and covered within cybersecurity insurance framework. So could you touch on those three things: social engineering, reputational damage, and APT, or advanced persistent threats?
Sure. Those are nuances to coverage, meaning that not all cyber policies will necessarily have those things in them. And that's what we look for when we're evaluating a business's current cyber coverage to see, do you have these things? Social engineering insurance is famous for making words and phrases complicated. Instead of saying, email scams, they say social engineering. And that's really a fancy way of saying, you get an email in that looks like it's from your boss, and it says transfer $100,000 to this account outside the organization. You say, oh, my boss is telling me to do this, I'd better do this. And you go ahead and do that. Come to find out later, there was one letter that was different in that email from Michael Hale, and that actually, it wasn't him at all. It was an outside bad guy that was sending that. Now all of a sudden you're out $100,000. You're never going to collect that back from the bad guy. That money's gone overseas. You're not going to get that back. So you want to have coverage for social engineering. We see repeated claims in this area. And one of the things, there are so many claims that insurance companies are doing now as respect that kind of coverage, social engineering, is they're saying, we're happy to give you coverage for that, but we're going to require that you do verification. So if you get that kind of email from Michael Hale and it says, we want you to transfer this money here, that you're making a phone call to him to be sure that's really him. So those conditions are being put on these kind of cyber insurance policies, and it's very important to have that coverage. We've seen significant claims in this area. I had one recently involving a jewelry store where, in fact, there was a ruse email that came in from a bad guy that said, hey, instead of delivering this expensive diamond to this, we'd like you to send it to our other location. And of course, that was a location that wasn't existent at all. And ultimately, it wasn't just about sending or wiring money. It could be property that's involved. So social engineering is a very important coverage to have. The other one that is also important, as you mentioned, is advanced persistent threats. Those are a complicated way in the technology of saying that it's not just a sudden event where somebody hacks into your system, but somehow they've either placed cookies or some sort of IT procedure technology into your system that allows them to continue to monitor you over time. And sometimes insurance companies say, that's sort of a longer term thing, not a sudden event, so we may not cover that. The better policies do cover advanced persistent threats. So those are things to look for. Reputational damages, I think you mentioned also, is another one, which it's an important coverage because if you have a cyber claim, especially if it's a large one, you're probably going to be, you'll be in the news on that in many ways. We represented a nursing home that had a major cyber attack. And, it was all over the news. And ultimately, when that happens, your reputation can be damaged. So there's coverage you can buy that can help you with that. They'll help you with hiring public relations experts, helping to bolster back up your reputation. So that's all a part of what we find and look for in some of these complicated cyber policies. And they are complicated. Even when we read them, and we have trained eyes to do that, there are different endorsements that you can buy. These policies are changing all the time as technology advances. And so, it's something that we really try to stay on top of, but you got to look at all the exposures as they develop to say, is this something that's covered under our policy, or should we be looking for another policy? Going back to my original point, you don't want to buy the lowest price necessarily. And you don't want to buy it the way you buy your janitorial supplies. You want to make sure that you're looking carefully and have an expert that can say, this is the policy you want to go with. It's giving you what you need.
Michael, with the speed at which technology changes in this realm of cybersecurity insurance, which obviously the immediate takeaway is that not all cybersecurity policies are alike, and there's nuances and variances from organization to organization as it pertains to the type of coverage that they can get and what they do. I think those things are widely accepted by most. But what would you say is a reasonable kind of time frame under which you should evaluate your cybersecurity insurance or potentially make changes to it as technology changes?
Right. It should at least be an annual event. You should at least be looking at all of your insurance at least annually with your insurance advisor and your lawyer and your CPA as well. Why your CPA? Well, you've got business interruption coverage, right? If you have a fire or you have a cyber attack and your business is down, you're going to lose revenue. So you have coverage for that. So you want to have the CPA involved. It's part of a team approach, right? An annual review of protections for the business. So that's a good idea to do that. It doesn't mean necessarily that you shouldn't do that midterm. If you kind of are getting a hint after hearing what I have to say or seeing other videos and presentations on cyber and reading the many articles that are on the internet about it, you start to think, man, I wonder if I'm really covered for that area. Then you certainly could and should have an expert look at it. Many agencies like ours, for example, we're happy to do a review and say, this is what you have, this is what we think you should have. We don't charge for that at all for that initial kind of evaluation. So really, at least annually, Ryan, but I think as technology develops and as your business grows, you ought to be thinking about maybe even doing that midterm.
Very good. So, I tell my clients all the time, hey, listen, I'm no different than you. Cygnus is in the same position that you are. In fact, we are potentially considered a bigger target than maybe other organizations because of the very obvious fact that we manage other customer networks and other customer data. And so, our primary expertise is in the networking aspects of that. We're not data miners or data analysts from that perspective. Quite frankly, in most cases, Michael, I don't necessarily care what applications a customer runs on their network. I just care that those applications are commonly updated and patched along with the operating system. And so our job is really in that capacity to be the builder more so than the architect as it comes to, networks and building out and designing networks. But at the same time, customers ask me and come to me and say, hey, what else is there out there that I could be doing? I have this and this and that. Is there anything else? And oh, do we love that question, because there's always a something else in IT. There's always more that you can be doing. And so we balance that with practicality. And I oftentimes, for my clients, try to put myself in their shoes and ask myself the very plain Jane question of, would I spend money on that? Is that important to me? And so my job is to help customers mitigate risk by making them aware of what they can do. There's an old adage that we've always kind of stuck to as far as being a sales professional, and that is, I'm not a salesman. I just help people buy what they want. And so similarly, that kind of thought process suggests that we really do try to be an advocate of information more than, kind of a emperor of execution. And so we just let customers know what they can be doing and how they can go about doing it. And we partner ourselves with organizations like yours to ensure that we're in tune with some of the most common aspects of your engagement on that side of the equation and what you can help customers with. And we do that in such a way, hopefully, where there's a win-win-win for everyone, in the sense that we want to make sure we continue to educate our customers, and we want to make sure that we continue to outfit ourselves with the right technology offerings and the right expertise within our organization to help our customers in implementing these various different tools and changing the culture of their environments and workforces and user communities, so that they become, more in tune with, what they can and shouldn't be doing in their daily activities. And so, I think that in summary, there's such a long potential conversation that we could have around cybersecurity. What Cygnus wanted to do is just take a few minutes of your time to extrapolate from you some of the high points of your engagement with your clients and in the industry, and how you see everything kind of unfolding. And so the last couple questions I'd like to ask you is, as a professional, what do you see, if anything, as problems within cyber insurance? I know you mentioned it, although people have talked about it for a few years. It really is relatively young in its practice, I would imagine, or I guess I'm hoping that you might educate us as to, how advanced it's gotten, where it's come from, and whether or not you see any industry issues with cyber insurance in general.
It goes back to the old story of, hey, I've got homeowners insurance on my house, so I can put candles on the Christmas tree. And, it's this idea that sometimes you rely too much on insurance policies of saying, I'm not really worried about this situation because I've got that fire insurance, or I've got coverage if an employee sues me for something, or I've got cyber coverage. So now maybe I don't need to spend all that extra money on IT because I've got coverage to back myself up. You don't want to look at it that way. And that's a big problem with cyber. First of all, many businesses think that it's not going to happen to them, especially if they're smaller businesses, right? They're thinking, well, that may happen to an IBM or General Motors, or, some of these companies like Target had a huge breach a number of years ago. And that actually came from someone went through their vendor to get to Target's data information. So a lot of times you get this false sense of security that it's not going to happen to me, but if it does, I've got this coverage, so I don't really need to to worry about having the intricate services of a Cygnus. And that simply is not true. Not only does cyber coverage not cover everything, there are always exclusions and conditions in these policies, right? But you want to have a partner like a Cygnus that's going to say, well, these are the things that we can do to make sure that you don't have a claim. Because if you have a claim, one of the things you and I had talked about offline before was what really affects these premiums. If you have a claim, your premium is going to skyrocket through the roof. Well, they might if you don't show the insurance company that you've got technical procedures in place from a risk management standpoint that are going to tell the insurance company that this wouldn't happen again. You've got redundancies. You've got systems where you're verifying these emails coming in that are asking you to transfer money. You've got the right firewalls. So, that's a big area that I see. And especially as the industry develops, there are new bells and whistles all the time being added to these policies, like advanced persistent threats. So, it's a tough area when insurance companies are getting on the bandwagon and adding different policies and different coverages all the time to kind of say which is the right one. So those are a couple of the real significant problems. And I guess I mentioned earlier that the applications are one, and it bears repeating because I am seeing carriers say that, hey, you told us you had this great cyber response plan in place, and it turns out you didn't. So here's your money back, and you don't have any coverage at all. So it's a critical area, these applications for insurance. I can't really stress that enough.
Awesome. Michael, a longtime friend and business colleague, tell the folks that may happen to bump into this or come across this or want more information, tell them what would be the best way to reach you.
Right. Well, our phone number here in my direct dial is 248-321-8941. And I'm happy to answer any questions, both as a coverage lawyer, some of the claims I've seen, but also to maybe tell you what I think of your cyber policy or your other policies that you have in place. You can do that, or our email is pretty simple, mhale@360rmi.com. That's Risk Management Inc. So it's 360rmi.com. Those are ways to get in touch with me.
Awesome. And similarly, again, I'm Ryan Perry with Cygnus Systems. Very great conversation with you as always. Always have good conversations. I know you have worked with Cygnus for many years. I know you work with my wife and I on our business. And so just can't thank you enough for taking some time out of your very busy day to chat with your old pal, Ryan Perry. I appreciate it very much. And hopefully there's some things that we talked about that would spark some interest or at least help people along the yellow brick road of cyber security and network security and all things of the like. And we certainly will continue to have dialogue around this. I know my colleague Scott Kuby has also had some dialogue with some folks that we will be publishing and providing out into the community. And so with that, I thank you very much. Again, Michael Hale, 360 Risk Management, and yours truly, Ryan Perry from Cygnus Systems, signing off, and have a fantastic day, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.